setup, and I hope this all works. Right, first of all, we'll just run through a couple of things that we've obviously done in our sessions before, but you need to probably keep in mind and refresh yourself on for some of you. You have your grades of pencil. So we have H's through to your B's. Now your H's, they start getting harder. So obviously when you're pressing down, they're the ones that you've got to be a bit more careful of because they'll dent the paper, but they get lighter. So obviously the tone gets lighter with the higher the H. Opposite to that, you've got your B's. Obviously, when you want to go into more shading and you want to put a bit more depth into it, you go higher up the B's, but these get softer. So obviously, you can put a bit of pressure on, although you can still dent your paper if you put too much pressure on. You will actually get more of a deep tone coming out from it. Okay, so you can swap in between pencils as you go, depending on what part of your picture that you want to be drawing, you know, how dark you want it to be, how much shadow you want to give to it. All in general, if we start with sort of around about HB pencil when we're doing just the sketching, we'll continue with the tones once we get more into it, once we want to put the shadows and everything else that goes along with it. Okay, now you can, if you haven't already got these, but you can get a little set only for about sort of £3 or £4, something like that. So these are graphite pencils. That gives me my set. All right, now remember, when we're doing any sketching, it's always good to keep your hand light. You don't want to be leaning against the paper, and then that restricts your movement so that you're only getting your like your wrist, and you'll end up, rather than getting nice straight lines, if you want it, they'll be curved and you're restrictive. Okay, so allow your arm to be quite loose on the paper. Let your shoulder do all the work to get yourself nice rotated. So if you're doing any circle motions, let it come from your shoulder blade. That's a ball socket, so it's easy to get that nice circle motion. If you're doing any circles, which we're going to do a little bit of practice work as a just, you know, an exercise to get ourselves going in a minute, you'll see, if I get my HB pencil, you'll see circle motions, keeping it nice and light. I'll rotate several times before I actually put my pencil onto the paper. So I'm happy with the motion that I've got. And then when my pencil comes through, which I don't know if you can see, so I will do it in a bit darker. I'm going to go for a 6B, but you can keep with a HB. So once again, allow it to go around a few times. And as you can see, you can take out with the rubber all the ones that don't make the circle. So if there's bits that are a bit too far out, and then you go, you don't need a compass or anything like that. You can actually get your circles just by hand. All right, it's the same with your angles. If you hold your pencil further out, okay, at the end, if you want to get some nice straight lines, move the paper where you're comfy. So if your motion is coming across like this with your hand, as you move your paper, you can give yourself any angles that you really want without being awkward as you do them. You're actually moving the paper to make it more comfy. Okay, so all I want you to do is just practice just a little bit. If you feel comfier putting a little finger out so that you can see where you are with the paper, that helps how much pressure you're going to put on where you're going to touch the paper, because you're actually holding at the end. Once again. All right, So we've got some nice little straight lines. We've got our circles. Okay, I'm going to turn it over because this is just our practice bit. Also, keep in mind about ellipses, you know, the angles in which you're actually seeing something. Now that comes with, once again, ovals. So if I had a cup of tea, remember, if I'm going to look directly onto my cup, I'm going to see more of a circle. If I put my tea further away from me, I start to see the ellipse get smaller and smaller, thinner and thinner, until if I'm looking directly at an angle where I don't actually see a circle or any kind of oval at all, it'll just be a straight line. Okay. What else do we have to run through? Oh yeah, when we're doing any sketches, and I will try to remind you at any point when we're doing our portraits and stuff, is that if you're sitting at an angle, you're going to be drawing from where your eyes are seeing the paper. Now, if that paper is at an angle, obviously you might end up with the picture looking off. Okay, so always stand up, have a look over the top of your paper to make sure that everything's okay. Because if you're doing a picture of a face, let's have a look. Hold on, let's get a paper. If we're doing a picture of a face and I was to put my arm down so that I'm comfy doing it, okay, and I'm going to say, okay, down here, I'm going to put my eyes, this area, then I'm going to put my nose, and then my mouth, and then if I give myself a nice circle from here, it looks fine as a nice circle from here, but when I look on top, I've done it at a skew-width angle. Okay, so it's making sure that you're checking how things are looking directly face on with the paper. Right. Right. So, as you might have guessed, I've actually paused the recording for a minute there. I've made myself a lovely cup of tea. Now, remember, anytime you want, if you want to pause, you can pause. If you want to rewind and re-watch whatever you might have missed or not got properly, that's the nice thing about this Zoom recording, is that them amenities are there to be used. Okay, so anytime you want to pause and make yourself a cuppa, please do so. Right, now when I get on to doing the actual sketching, okay, we're looking at paper next. Now, the paper that I used for doing just the little tiny bit of demonstration work just now, that was just ordinary printer paper. Now, at home, you can use whatever comes to hand. If you've got printer paper, then you can use the printer paper. If you don't have the printer paper, just use a pad of, you know, anything that you have, you can use. Obviously, if you want to then start getting more and more into you doing your sketching, you're looking at more refined bits of paper, and the different grades go up. So you're looking about 200 gram paper for doing drawings, and you can get harsher grains, you can get fine grain. I actually gone, if I show you this is the pad that I've got. You've got a fine grain, it's heavyweight, that's why it's 200 gram. It's a nice thick bit of paper, but it's also, as you can see, quite smooth to work on. All right, obviously if you go for 140 gram paper, it's going to be a bit more flimsy. Okay, so it's just different qualities of, you know, how much you want to pay out for. It's the same with anything. Like when we do our watercolors, they're usually done on 300 gram paper. It's nice and thick. The acrylic, you also get on quite thick paper, but obviously it's specialized to allow you to have the acrylics on there. That's why you can't use watercolor over onto the acrylic paper if it's specially designed for acrylic. But now we're going to get going with our sketching. Okay, so I would have given you this in advance, okay, but this is going to be our picture that we're going to choose. Now it's obviously a dog portrait, okay, and what I usually do when I'm doing portraits is I print off 2 copies, one in colour and one in black and white. Obviously black and white print is going to make it easier to get your tones where you want to use your pencil grades later on, okay, because of obviously colour comes into it, it's more confusing. With the coloured one, I usually actually cut it out, okay, so now you've got 2 bits, one that's got a cut out, one that's actually got the black and white, okay. Now when we do our sketching, okay, you can use this one to double check on your size and your angles, even if you want to. I mean, I will do what, you know, makes it easier for everyone else, okay. You could draw around if you want, and then we can put the features in afterwards, so you've got an exact shape, okay. If I do that, that will be I'm going to do it on an A3 piece, okay. And what I usually like to do, it's just like our easels. This is just an end of an old pad that I'm using, but it's good to use something underneath so that when you're actually drawing away, you don't get the bumps of the paper interfere with any pencil marks, okay. So even if you've got a pad, something like a book to put underneath, makes it so much easier. All right, so as I said, if I do a quick sketch around the outside, once again, like I told you, we use our HB pencil. So there you have it. The whole one has been sketched around the outside, and now it's up to us to now have a look, and you're going to fill in very lightly all the other areas that need to add to our sketch. As you can see, it's quite easy for me to just put the picture there, hover my pencil over where I want to draw, just to make sure that I'm getting the right sizes, right shape, in the right place. This is a little bit of a cheat, but I think it'll be helpful for everyone at home, because obviously I'm not able to be right there with you to give you any sort of guidance in person. Now you can do this obviously if you've got your own pets at home. Get a nice picture, make sure it's quite up close, and then what you're going to do, like I say, print off a couple of copies, one in colour, one without, in the black and white, and then you can start developing your portrait from there in the same process. It can take a little bit of time, but each time just keep swooping it back, keeping where you're going, Keep it nice and light. Go too heavy too quick, what will happen is you'll just lose where you've got to. Then you'll have to start rubbing out. Each time I look at the picture, I'm looking at where I'm sketching. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry on doing exactly the same process with all of the different little nooks and crannies where you've got little creases going on with the arms of the dog, the legs here, you know, and then I will come back to you after that. So you're going to keep doing the same process, keep it hovering, come it off, bring it away, sketching, okay, and then hopefully we'll be at the same stage when I next come back on. Okay, hold on. Right, so once you've done all your sketching like I have, and you've let your tea go cold like I have, it does take a long time, but it's getting them angles, getting all of the little areas that you want to put shadow or shade into, the features, it's getting them all right before you start doing any of your shadows and shading, because if you don't get them right, then obviously the overall look won't look right when you come to it. Okay, and next thing I was going to say is we have these. Now these to help smudge areas, they're wooden, okay, and I've just got to go and find something, so I'm going to have to pause it again. Sorry about that. I like working with these ones, okay. These are just silicone rubber ones, okay, and I find that these work well when you're smudging as well, okay. You've got different sort of shapes, and obviously if you're working on a small area, the pointy they are, they actually literally minimize the area that you want to work on. All right, now this is where I pick out what colors I want to go with for shade wise. So I'm going to start working with, let's have a look, I'm going to go with a 4B, and when it comes to doing any kind of portraits, whether it be person or whether it be an animal, what you want to try and do is work on the eyes first. Once you get your eyes done and you're really happy with them, obviously you work out from there, but that will be the first thing that you're actually attracted to, because of obviously people being people. When you look at someone, you're actually looking straight at their eyes. If you get their eyes right, even if you've made mistakes elsewhere, your overall first initial impression is that, wow. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to make sure that you've got a nice, it doesn't have to be overly sharp, but we're going to work on our eyes, and I'm going to work on the one that's further away from my arm, so I'm not smudging it. Okay, and it's always easy to think, okay, I'm going to start here with my drawings, and what you don't realize is you're actually putting your fist into it and it smudges it. Okay, so it's always good to have a secondary bit of paper. You can lean on that if you like. Okay, and then with my black and white copy, I'm going to have a look at the paper, and I'm going to sort of see where I am for my eye, and I'm going to start giving a little bit of shade. I'm not going too heavy, too quick. It is a nice 4B pencil, so it's going to be dark enough anyway. I'm going to start with my pupils, and I'm just rotating in little tiny circles because I don't want to put too much on too quickly and then have to sort of rub it all out. But just controlling where it's going. And as I want to go transitioning it from a dark area into a light area, all I'm going to do is just lift off gently so the light area doesn't have as much of the graphite go into the paper. And remember, I'm not pushing too hard because I don't actually want to dent the paper. And I will be going darker, but at the moment I'm going to stick with my 4B. Okay. Now looking at the angles, making sure that I'm going a bit further over the top of my little sketch, making sure that darker areas match up to what I need to do on the paper. Now there's a little light where the glisten of the eye has actually caught a bit of light, and that'll help give it fluidity when it's all done. As you can see, I don't like to rush. This is why quite often most of my drawings end up taking me about 5 hours. It's always going backwards and forwards. My eyes will look at the original and then glare back at what I'm doing. And just after the eye, you've got this little tiny shadow. And there's like a little dent in the fur. I've included that. So now I've got my eye in place. I'm going to get one of my little smudgers I like to work with. Very gently, all I'm doing is just running it down. Now with these ones, because they're silicone, it does actually act like a bit of a rubber as well. So if I was to keep going, it would take some of the graphite out of the actual page. As you can see, it's managing to keep very local to where I want it. Just very, very gently. It's pushing the graphite into the really fine grains of the paper. I actually thought it was going to be even more strange having to talk to a phone on my own. But it's not too bad. I think the worst will come later when I have to sort of check it to make sure it's recorded properly. And then I find out that I have to listen to my awful voice. Everyone hates their own sound of their own voice, don't they? Right, so as you can see, we have what looks like an eye coming on. Okay, now, like I say, I'm going to now go with a little bit darker. So I'm going to get a 6B out. This is from a different set, I know, but you'll be able to see the difference in a minute. All I'm doing, once again, is nice and light, putting it in an area I want to work on, but not overdoing it. And when you're working on your portraits and pencil work, it's really important that you really look at the picture that you're following. I mean, I tell quite a few of you many a times that, especially when you're looking at faces, because our brains know where the eyes are. Obviously, they're two, they should be symmetrical sort of thing, you know, and the nose, the mouth. But when you're doing a portrait, you might have a 3/4 look. And what quite often happens is that your brain will alter what you're seeing. So as you're drawing it, you will draw it how you assume the features to be looking. When in fact, if you're looking back at the original all the time, it may be that the head is slightly tilted and the head might be slightly at an angle. So you're trying to copy the picture, whereas your brain is telling you that no, it's got to be symmetrical, so they've got to be so far apart, or they've got to be at the same height, when in fact it doesn't work like that. If you're following a photograph, obviously there's going to be little areas that are not going to be completely dead straight, and obviously our brains take over sometimes and will correct that for you when you least want it. I'm just going to keep going. Really bringing out the darker areas around the eye and trying my best to leave that nice light area that's got the light hitting. Now, if you can see, adding in this 6B is transforming that tone quite significantly from the 4B that we had. Now, depending on what pencils you have, some of the grades go up to sort of 9B, you know, you can get quite high ones. You might be restricted to only going up for about a 6B, okay? But you still work with what you've got at home, and obviously just space it out so that your darkest is going to be your darkest, regardless of what grade the pencil is. You can see I'm not really rushing this at all. Just taking my time, making sure that each time I'm adding, I'm being very definite but cautious how I do it, because you don't want to be just getting carried away and then end up having to rub it out and then alter. That's why it's important, like I say, to get all your sketching part done and be as accurate as you can before you actually start with any of your shading. Now, when I'm actually doing this, I'm only tickling the paper again. Do that for quite a few different things when I'm painting, and you know, with a paintbrush, you sort of be as light as you can. You actually just get the tip of the paintbrush. It's the same with this. I'm literally using just the tip. And once again, the direction I'm using is actually the same direction that the fur would be going, because that all adds to keeping it as realistic as possible. All right. So as you can see there already, we're getting an eye forming. Looking at this sort of shape, still quite happy with the shape, how it's going. I'm going to cut in a tiny bit more around where the little light is hitting it. So I'm going to refine that area a bit more now. Very softly again. I think with quite a lot of you tend to rush a lot of the time, obviously, because we've only got 3 hours at the session, and I think a lot of the time you try to get as much done so that it completes it all in the same session. Where you're at home, you're allowed to take your time a little bit more. You can put it down, come back to it. So if you feel that you've worked quite hard on it already and you want to have a break, you can take yourself off to have a break. All right, so I'm quite happy with that eye. Now we can start on the other eye and do the process once again. So add your 6B, start getting some of your shading done, then come in with a stronger, deeper colour tone, and then you can bring that in. And remember, our light sources seem to be coming from our left hand side hitting this, and although there's not a light hitting the other eye, I will actually put one in because it helps to give that a glaze over the eyes, so it looks like they're a bit more realistic. Okay, so I'm going to pause it again, and then I will put it back on once I finish the other eye, so that you're not just boringly watching me carry on. Okay. All right, I've done the second eye. It's come out a little bit darker than I expected, so if that happens for you in comparison with the first, just gently have your rubber to hand. Just make sure it's nice and clean so it takes off a nice clean layer. And as you can see, I put in the little light that's not in the actual photo, but I'm working with that because that helps to give a nice little colour into it, so makes it look like it's wet. Right, once you've got far, that's when you can start building outwards now. Still keeping in mind that you keep looking back and referring back to the original photograph, and then you can start building out, building out. Remember, you've got your piece of paper so that you can lean on. So if you're going to go from the left eye, then you can start just bringing in. I'm using the 6B again. All I'm doing is just putting like little tiny areas, the direction that the fur would go. Nice little small strokes, just where the darker patches are. And for the lighter patches, obviously you can go back to your HB. Remember, don't press too hard. Same direction. Just very, very gently. And once again, you can get your little smudgers out. You can then go nice and gently over. And it's going to give you a nice tone to work with. Not too dark, not too light, just like a mid-tone. Then you keep adding more. This whole area here is going to have a little bit of deeper tone to it, so I'm going to start bringing in a little bit more with my 6B. Like I say, just keeping it with the direction of the fur. Now there's going to be, around the eye, there is going to be a little bit of lighter area as well. So we're going to do what we did last week, where you've got your negative areas. So the negative part is coming from the inside where it's nice and deep here. We're going to leave that edge nice and light, and then we're going to start with a little bit more deep the other side with the cut tone, and that will give us our edge. So we don't have to outline. It's literally done on whether or not the tone is light or if the tone is dark. So here you can see there's a little roll of the fur where it's obviously not a pug, but how a pug would have them sort of bulges. You're going to actually use your negative area here, having this darker patch behind. That's going to help bring this little bulge to be light without having a nice outline to it. It's literally natural looking. I know that there's certain bits that are a little bit darker, so I am going to put a little tiny bit more pressure on my pencil work, and then lightening off when I know that it's actually fading out and getting lighter. So once again, just done a little small patch. And now come over it with my little smudger. Same direction as the fur goes in. The fur has actually changed direction on this little bit. It actually goes up that way. Remember, if you're more comfortable, turn the actual page until you find your place where you're actually not overstraining your wrists or, you know, feeling uncomfortable drawing. And just gently, where you've got the light patch, I'm just cutting into it very gently with the smudger, so it's just drawing out just a tiny bit. And what that's going to help do is give a light effect to the hairs that are there. So you're giving a little bit of shadow, so there's a little bit of sort of movement here where I've put the little bits down. It'll make the hairs of the white bit look like they're there, so it's not just a straight line. Although they're really fine, you wouldn't really notice them too much, but I get a little bit carried away with trying to put lots of detail in. I'll just go a little bit below the eye now. Same thing, not actually outlining. This is actually where it's going to have a little bit of shadow in. As you can see around the eye, there's that nice little white light patch now. And once again, kind of a little darker patch. It's really looking at the detail in the photo. Bringing that out in your picture. As you can see, I'm not covering it completely. I've got a few little tiny lines down here because on the original you're actually getting a little bit more shadowing where individual sort of fur bits are. I'm really doing this very, very light because I've still got my 6B. But this is going to give us our lid to our eye there. And once again, just give out a little tiny bit of shadowing. It comes down like a bit of a V, sort of like a triangle effect, doesn't it? So back to our smudger, very gently. I'm going to just put in where the eye line is, and then I'm going to bring them down the direction of the fur. Very lightly, it's just like tapping it. I'm not actually moving it about all over the place, it's literally just a little tiny tap each time. A bit like stippling it. And keep referring back to your picture. Make sure that you're working to where you need to be working. Now, if you're using these silicone ones, there's quite a lot of the actual graphite that stays on there. And if you want to do really, really power areas, you don't have to actually put any of your pencil work on there. So you've got a little bit of shadow in here, and I'm not going to use any of the pencil work. I'm just going to add in a tiny bit directly off the smudger, keeping it nice and light, not pressing hard at all. And as you can, well, I don't know if you can see it, but there is a little tiny shadow going on. That's literally been formed without any pencil work. It's just literally come off. And I'm still doing it in the direction of the fur. Right, back to the pencil work again. So find yourself another little bit of shadow in. And literally put in little tiny dabs of the pencil onto the paper. It comes down. I'm not going to work too much on the actual lips yet. We'll come back to them. I'm going to just build up on this area first and do it a section at a time. Right, so as you can see, there's probably going to be more tone that's going to be added to this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on the other side and bring that out, so that each time you're working on a piece, you're keeping a bit like a symmetrical part going on, but obviously you're aware of how much pressure you're putting on, the direction to build up, so that you're keeping it nice and consistent. When we do the ears, it will be one ear at a time, but then you'll be doing both ears one after the other, so that you're getting that area done. Then you'll do the mouth area. So you're working on sections, not giving yourself overall work where you're working on everything all in one go. It's bit by bit by bit, and that way you're keeping control of how much you're putting on. Once you've got it all there, that's when you can sort of readjust it. I need a bit more tone over here, so I'm going to start darkening up areas and getting darker and darker. It's much easier, and I've always said this, much easier to go darker and darker than it is to go too dark too quickly and then to try and lighten it back up again. It goes for anything, even if you're using acrylics, watercolors, or even the pastels. It's the same principle. Okay, so I'm going to work on the other side. Once again, I'm going to get out my 6B to work with. Now, look, so here. obviously this dog is a short-haired dog. And if you were working on a longer-haired dog, then obviously you might approach the fur slightly different. You may need to think a bit more about how your negative areas, like we did last week, once again, they come into it. So to get a nice light sort of curl to a bit of fur, so if we had a hair that was going say like that, you may need to darken up the actual in-between areas. So as you can see on the picture, you're actually leaving the lighter areas and you're actually doing the negative areas. All right. But like I say, this is a nice short-haired dog, which makes it much easier, especially with the smudging, because you can just do patches where it's just the tone, and here and there we're going to put little markers where it looks like you've got single hairs going on. It gives it a little added realistic effect. Once again, go with the direction of the fur. Take your time, don't rush it, and don't press too hard. Just doing single layers at the moment. And the hairs go this way when they're going around it like a bit. There's going to have to be a lot more colour that goes on this. Much more pencil work to get it a lot darker. Like I say, we're doing it in sections here. Once we've got it all done, then you can judge whether or not certain areas will need a lot more darker, and then you can keep adding and adding until you're satisfied with how it's going. Once again, on this side, where you've got this lighter patch, we want the effect that there are hairs there. So rather than a nice clean edge, we're going to just, with our smudger, smudge little tiny bits down, so it just breaks it up. If you don't have a smudger at home, you can use your fingers, but the idea is that you don't get the smallness of the area that you want to work with. So obviously smudgers are a good idea to use like that. I mean, if you were doing say a sketch of something that was from something visual in front of you, rather than doing like a portrait. You might want to use different styles of shading, because you have the cross hatching that goes on, and they all give you different sort of, it's a bit like our the styles that you get through painting and the styles that you get through you know, drawing are no different. You use different techniques and they'll give you a different look. And obviously smudging, it allows you to blend in from one tone to another more smoothly, and it softens the area as well. So overall it can improve on what a portrait can be looking like, because of it, make it more realistic. And for me that works nicely because I like the realistic. Right, now we're going to be going up a little bit higher. So we've got this middle area here, we've got this little bit of fatty roll, or whatever you might want to call it. Right. Same sort of idea. Now you keep him in mind when you look at the original. As you can see, you've got light hitting it, so now we've got this little dent in the head, and any little ripple you're going to be putting in the nice shadows and keeping in mind that the light is hitting from this area here. Okay, so you keep going, and what I'll do is I'm going to pause the video, and once I've done a little bit more, because obviously you don't want to be watching me for ages doing mine, then we'll catch up and we'll start on the ears together again. Okay, right, so as you can see, I've now increased a little bit of depth in the tone, just so that you can see how the deepness sets it off. But it is, like I said before, building up the tones. Start off light, and you can always increase and get darker and darker. Now obviously I've been stopping and starting so that you've been able to follow along and do it at your own leisure. But for me, I've been sat here for now about 2.5 hours, so I'm going to give myself a break, and then I will post up another link to the part 2. Okay, thank you. Right, let's put this. Right, once again, this is the part 2. Okay, if you've had a break, obviously coming back to doing your pencil work, you might want to do just a little bit of practice exercises just to get you back into the routine of using your pencil. Remember, you can hold your pencil at the different ways. You can have it obviously when you're doing nice detailed work, but if you're doing certain sketching, you might want to hold it at the end. It gives the nice freer rein where you're using the pencil. So just as a quick exercise to get you going again, practicing doing your nice straight lines. Once again, it comes from your shoulder blade. Don't press down on your paper with your fist. Okay, get nice and loose so that everything can be just very soft, very fluid. Circles, straight lines, ovals, ovals, ovals. I'm not doing anything in particular, I'm just doing random shapes. Okay, remember, if you want to turn your paper around so that you're still getting your best and more comfortable angles for doing certain things, like your straight lines, obviously your circles. When it comes down to doing shading, remember, you can actually, although you can do it like this, where you're very defined, where you're holding your pencil, you can actually use the pencil on the side, and that's what we will be doing some of this in a minute. But you can do shading. Once again, just keep it nice and light, and then if you want to, you can start darkening it up afterwards. So if you want to transition, and keep turning the pencil round as well, because it might flatten off, especially doing this. So if you twist the pencil, it gives a nice edge to work with each time. Okay. Now I was just using a normal HB pencil for this. You can still see with a HB pencil that you've got a transition from a dark tone to a light tone. That's merely just by control of the pencil and how much pressure you're putting on the pencil into the paper. Okay. Obviously we went through the different gradings of pencil. With each grade of pencil, you can still get lighter tones, darker tones, depending on the pressure that you're putting on. Okay, so that's a skill that you're going to have to sort of, the more you work with pencils, the more you'll build it up. Okay, so now we've just done a little tiny bit of an exercise to warm ourselves up. We'll go back to our drawing. Okay, now I know that I had the camera, it was ran the wrong way yesterday. It had altered itself, so spent the whole time at a strange angle that you didn't see as clearly as I was hoping you to. I've changed the way that the camera is today, so hopefully it will be a lot better. As you can see, this is how far I got yesterday, and hopefully you may have got exactly the same place if you were waiting for me. Okay, now I have my picture in front. That is my black and white picture that we're going with. Okay, so once again, we start off on particular areas. I'm going to work on the ears this time, so I'm going to start doing the ear, and we'll get so far, and then I will pause so it gives you time to do your ear, and then we'll come back to see how everyone's getting on afterwards. So I've got myself a 5B pencil. Okay, and I'm still looking at the way that the hairs run. Okay, so I'm putting on the pencil work in the same direction. Keeping it nice and light. What I mean by that is that I'm not putting too much pressure on the pencil. And I'm just going with all of the darker areas first. There's some lighter shadow bits. So if you go into the shadows, it will ping out the lighter bits afterwards. Now most of the time was taken up yesterday with all the detail of the eyes. That's because you want to be putting all of the detail into the places where the features are going to be what attract your eyes to them. Okay, and obviously a lot of time was spent yesterday on the face. Once we have the face done, all of the hairs and the fur around the other areas, we will work a lot faster. Now if you can see here, I'm actually bringing the pencil so it's cutting in, because there's a line of light fur that will be going over the other side here, and what we're doing is we're going to just intermittently bring in our shadows here, so it gives the effect that you've still got light bits of fur going into it. Because if you look at the picture that we're following, there's these little tiny areas here, and it's them that we want to create. We're going to create that by using our negative area again. You won't realise how much that negative painting or negative areas actually affect a lot of the pictures that we do. You work with them a lot more than you realise. Yeah. Looking at the picture that we're following, there is little tiny sort of lines of darker bits going up in the ear. So all I'm doing, I'm not pressing hard, but I'm going to make sure that there's a little bit of contrast going on. Now I've only done that far. I'm going to get a little smudger and I'm going to start smudging. Like I said, this bit, individual smudgy bits. That way you get the little light. It will appear that you've got the light bits of fur going over that area as well. Remember, if you haven't got one of these smudgers, you can use your finger. The only problem with the finger is that you don't get the refined areas if you want to work on such a tiny area. But I suppose you could always get a Q-tip if you've got a Q-tip indoors. That might work. And it will make your fingers go a bit dirty. And as you can see, it's starting to take shape. Without going too dark. Now these lighter areas, what I'm doing is I'm just going to bring my finger over and it's spreading what's already been put on. It's taking a little bit of that colour and moving it around. Okay. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to redo the other side exactly the same way that we just done this one. And then I'm going to pause it in the meantime. So if you can carry on with that, then we'll come back and we'll see if we need to then darken these up, just like I did with the eyes. Obviously, the eyes on the original are really quite deep. So we're going to tone up this as well. The ears will need to be a little bit darker, but for now, that's as far as we want to go, okay? Right, so now we have both ears, okay? We're going to get a deeper tone. I'm actually going to go with a 9B because I've got some different pencils here. Now, talking of pencils, like I say, we have your ordinary, like your graphite pencil. You get so many different types of pencil, and this one has no wood. It's got a plastic coating. The whole thing is made up of graphite. So if I wanted to do a nice shade, if I put that over here and I put that down, it will cover quite a large area. Okay, but yeah, if you were to go into depth on how many different pencils there are tons. But graphite set of pencils, H's, B's, bit of a mix, you can't go wrong. Okay, I'm going to darken up some of our ears. Okay, some bits of our ears. We've got these in bits here. If I get the original, you see how dark they are. Okay, we're going to put a bit more tone into these to bring our ears out a bit. Now we've got, it's basically like a groundwork for where we want our shading to be. We're going to now just refine that a little bit more by adding in a bit more depth. Now once again, because of this is a deeper tone of the B's, I don't have to press too hard, and it's just naturally just going to be give me a really dark tone. Okay, so we're going to add a bit of that in. Once again, I want to sort of zigzag it onto this area so that the lighter bit here looks like there's fur that's actually cut over the top of the darker bits. This is the deepest area, so I always say try to avoid having sort of one direction or changing direction when you're actually shading. A lot of the time I end up doing little tiny circles, because when you're getting the little circles, and I do that a lot with the paintbrushes as well when I'm doing painting, it distracts from the eye. You don't see lines, you're just seeing a body of tone. And obviously once we get the smudging going on with this as well, that will take out any repetitive lines, you know. I suppose you don't realise how much work goes into some of these really detailed sort of paintings and drawings that you see. And I must admit, it's actually getting a little bit easier trying to talk to a camera. I was so nervous yesterday, unbelievable. I did actually wonder whether or not to put some music on, but then I thought, because I'm stopping and starting, I don't think that would be very good for you to be listening to me with a bit of music and then just start to get into it and then it changes. But I thought at home you'll probably be able to have a bit of music on at your own leisure. Okay, so that's as much as dark as I'm going to go for now, and we're going to see how that comes out. So nice and lightly smudge it all in. Remember, once again, where the zigzaggy bits are, try and zigzag them on. This really does push it into the actual paper. It's definitely seeming to bring out that tone. It's a lot more in keeping with what we've already got for the eyes. Once again, just very, very lightly. Much better. So we're going to do exactly the same on the other side for the other ear. We'll get them darker patches. On this one, as you notice, because of the lights coming from this area, you've got this darker patch here, but also you've got more of a depth coming from the inside. So it's a slightly different to the other side. But remember, nice little circles, add them on. Around this edging, just trying to make sure that it goes the same direction as the fur. Once again, you've got this area where you've got this lovely light fur coming across where the dark area is, so you want to cut them in. Let's talk a bit here. And once again, remember, I've got my piece of paper. Don't know if you've forgotten yours or if you've remembered, but so you don't get your fist with loads of smudging going on and what you've already drawn, you can rest it over the areas so that it protects them. I mean, most of the shading is about pencil control, how much of pressure you're putting on, how you can fade a dark into a light and a light into a dark. And it's working on sort of small areas, larger areas. Right, just looking at that, you've got a really, really fine bit that comes down here, there. Right. So that's both areas done for now. We can always top them up once we get everything done and you think that, okay, it still needs a bit darker or it might need tweaking. Always you can come back to it. Okay, so now we'll move down the face a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to go back to having my 5B this time. And now we're going to work on the nose and the mouth. Okay, so as we get down a bit lower, we've got this area here. It's got this darker bit. And once again, it's about working with your negative areas because you've got a nice little bump in front of this that's got the white or a lighter patch. It's how you put your shadows in. If you put your shadows in at the base here, so you've got shadow in above on this layer here where it dents in, but you've also got this little layer. When the two come together, it leaves a nice lighter patch in the middle, which will give you your little roll of fatty bit, a wrinkle bit, or whatever you want to call it. So then you move down. Now that nose bit here, where it comes down, it's not a dead straight line. If you're looking carefully at it, you've got this little tiny bit that comes over to the right, then it goes down a little bit and gets a bit wider. And although the middle bit is rather deep with colour, it goes off to the little side. You've got this secondary area that's going to have a little bit of in and out shadowing. Now where the light hits this nostril, we're going to keep this area light, so we're going to fade our little bit of shade this way. Then we're going to come this side and we've got little intermittent bits. There's like little tiny dented bits that go on the area. There's quite a lot of detail because you end up with all of these little ridges plus all the shadows. So once again, when it comes towards this bit, you've got a dark edge coming down towards the bottom here, but this area here, keep it nice and light because the deep bit underneath with the lower jaw is actually our negative area, which then gives this the lighter area to show up. Okay, once again, I'm not doing straight lines, I'm just doing little tiny circles, and every now and then bringing the circle up so it follows the little patterns of the ridges that are going on in the picture. And where the light is hitting it here, because there's ridges, you've got the darker patches plus the lighter patches. So I'm just filling in where the shadow is going to be, and then we'll do the smudging bit in a minute. It's just keeping in mind which bits are light, which bits are dark all the time. So just for this side, start going over with our smudger. Remember, I'm just keeping it nice and light. With anything, you can always darken it up afterwards if you need to go darker. Nearly there. Okay. So now I'm going to carry on. The other side is a lot darker, so it's a bit harder to see where your ridges are. So I'm just going to be putting in some darker patches and following the sort of pattern that I believe I'm seeing. It's definitely different on this side to the first side. It seems to be coming up a little bit like that. Still doing little circles. It's like the pattern is like a, it's in a way a bit like a crisscrossing, but it's going to be very, very subtle. There goes my belly. That wasn't on the video. Right. It's more of a darker shadow coming over this nostril as well. It starts up there. a tiny bit more in there. That's just seen. Goes in there. Right. Once again, smudge the other side in now.
One or two.
Oh, yes, please. So I'm going to pause it and I'll be back. We'll do the deepness of the nostrils in a minute. Right, I've been darkening this area up, okay, just in like we did with the ears, like the eyes, and still adding in little tiny depth bits so that you've got the tone going on nicely. Try not to make everything so consistent throughout. There are going to be areas where they are going to have really dark patches, and there's going to be areas where it's not so dark, and they're not going to be just evened out. It will be a mix. Now to put the nostrils in. Once again, you're going to come in, you can use either the 6B or go straight in with a deeper colour, okay? But you've got this area where it's dark, and that's going to give our nice light edge here. That's going to define that part of the nostril. So very, very gently. Nice and little circles. And there's an area that comes out. It's going to be quite dark. But like I say, you don't have to go too dark too quick. You can always darken it up afterwards. Now, if you look nice and closely, there is a little bit of detail where the nose has got like little tiny, like little pores. Little circle motions. And now, I might need to bring that down just a tiny, tiny bit. And this shadow on the outside closes in a little bit more, comes across. Right, not going to do any more at the moment. I'm just going to bring back my smudger. I'm going to put that all together nicely first to see if it needs anything adjusted. So the circle motion here. And either get a clean Q-tip, or if you just use a little bit of the rough paper, clean off the excess, and then just stipple the area where we're going to put a little tiny bit of detail there, because you don't want it to be all sort of blended in and taking away all of the refined bits. But obviously when you've got an area like this that you've just used, it gets really, really dirty. Just make sure that's all blended in. Right. And if you're happy with that nostril, then you can obviously move over to the other nostril. Once again, you're coming in, look at the shape. Make sure that you're getting the even sizing. And because there is a shadow again, these are completely different nostrils. This one sort of fuzzied out and it had a bit of detail, whereas on this side you don't have the fuzzing out and the detail. It is more of an enclosed nostril. And you've got this area that comes off that's darker patch. Remember, at any time you need to, you can always stand up, have a look directly on to your picture, just to make sure that you're getting the right shape and sizing. Because like I say, you're further back at an angle when you're sitting down doing your drawing, and without looking directly onto the paper, you don't realise if you're off centre. Like I say, there's lots of little areas where they're dimpling around the mouth. So once again, I'm going to come back with my smudger. Now I can start darkening up some of this around the outside. I'm not going to actually get, or when I said about cleaning this off, because this bit I'm actually going to use some of that excess on my smudger to just push that over, because where the shadowing is more on the right hand side here, some of that is actually darker than the first one. With a finger, because this whole area is a bit darker, you can just soften what you've done. I'm not pressing hard. Okay. Now we're going to work on the underneath bit. Remember, you've got this lovely dark edge that you're going to use, and you're going to leave this top lid here. The lip is actually light at the edge, so we're going to use this negative area here to make that nice light lid stand out. And if you haven't done already, make yourself a nice cup of tea at some point. I'm just trying not to leave mine on the side so it goes cold again like last time. Once again, you've got lots of sort of dimpling going on. Move the paper down. Right. I'm not going to fill in the gaps. All I'm going to do is just go over with me smudger, and I'm going to use some of that smudge to just bring it out a little bit. Remember, up against that edge, giving it a nice transition. We've got that nice light lip going on. The underneath is actually dark. Ooh, add some more to it in a minute. But like I say, sometimes it's easier just doing a little bit by little bit. One area at a time. I did wonder whether or not there was any possibility of actually doing like a speedy up bit for me, but I'm not very good with the technology, so I wouldn't know how to do it, and if it's possible, I don't know. I know you can for other things if I was to just video it as a time lapse, but I think by doing it this way, you can't just start and then talk and then go back into a time lapse. So that's why I've been here and there just stopping the video. I'll carry on with what I'm going to carry on, you carry on, and then we meet back up. also had another thought actually, because some of you might not have printers at home. So when we've done our first bit where I turned around and said that to make it easier for you, you can actually take the image, cut around it, and that way it gives you a nice clear outline to work from. Obviously, if some of you don't have printers, you might not have been able to have done that. So it's a case of going back to how we'd sketch. So you can use your overall sort of shaping to get like a basic rough outline to go from, and then you can bring up your detail after. Right, so we now got inside, we've got darker areas here. Now the reason why I've just gone over that a bit darker is because one, there's a lot of darkness in that area anyway. I've refined these little grooves maybe a bit too much, and you don't want it to overpower what you're looking at because you want to be attracted to the eyes, and then you see the body that way. Okay. Obviously this area here is going to have to come a little bit darker as well, so we'll add that once we've finished off the chin, and then we'll look at the face as a whole. And the chin, it's got another deep bit underneath. I'm not going to do any of the whiskers or any of the little hairs that are appearing all over the place. They will get done later on. I've gone back to my 6B. So I've got a mixture of the 9 and the 6 at the moment here. Like I said, if you need to, if it makes it comfier, you see, move your paper around. If your angle's changed and you want to get a little bit more comfy doing your shadowing and stuff. It's just amazing when you're doing something like this, or if you've got a painting on your board. Sometimes you think that it's in a fixed location, isn't it? So you try and work yourself around the actual paper, when in fact you can just quite easily just move the paper around. As you can see, there's going to be lots of darkening up. You've got this area here that still needs a little bit more work. Two little lumpy bits there. Right. Just a little bit more. So these bits here are going to be darker. And like I say, we're going to start darkening up this bit again. It's not a straight line, it is just a shadow as it goes up and down. There's little tiny grooves that go over. Tiny little grooves going down. Some bits are darker. Press a little harder if you need to for them bits. There's like a shadowing that's darker here. Because if you revert back to the actual colour one, you'll see that you've actually got this line going on. So we're going to add that in, so that makes that a little bit more defined. Keeping it nice and light, just going over all of this because this is going to be darker area. And although this is a nice light area, it's still in shadow, so we're going to put a really, really light shadow going over that. Got shadows over this, up there. It's actually a really, really, really fine line that comes up over that side. It's a little bit darker in there. Does feel like it takes forever, but it's all worth it because you're just taking your time. It lets you see there's so many more details that the eye doesn't always see straight off, but you can just keep adding and adding. Just there you've got that little tiny bit that comes off that centre tiny bit. Remember that line is the deepest, darkest bit, but you do have other bits. A little dent going off there on that side. Once again, you've got this darker bit that came up on this side. On this side, it's slightly lighter because you've got the light that's been sort of projected over from the left-hand side coming through. So that's faded there. A bit more tone over the whole lot here. Keeping it very light so I don't get a nice line going on or anything. It is just keeping it transitioning. That's going to be a lot darker here. But we want a bit of colour down this side as well. So let's smudge that one in nice and lightly. The other good thing is that if you feel like you have gone a little bit too dark in certain areas, if you, with these silicone ones, you can actually use them a little bit like rubbers, as long as they're clean. So you can add a little bit of light. Coming back onto it. Right. So far it's okay. Right. Remember, anytime, just need to sort of have a look and see how it's looking straight on. Now, the one mistake that many people end up making with the nose is they always end up sketching it out a little bit too small, and it never really fits the face. So you remember your perspective. Obviously, your nose is actually going to come towards you. So quite often there will be a little bit bigger than you expect. This is why it ends up taking me so long. I end up starting to find a piece and then keep working on it. Right, so now we're going to do a little bit more of the speedier work, which is now coming down towards the chest. Now, obviously, where it's a larger area, we don't want to be, let's go with maybe a 3B. You don't want to be, just sharpen the pencil. It's breaking on me. Right. Is that going to work? Bear with me. The pencils now decided to do something silly. It's breaking. Right, what you can't see is I'm just literally using my pencil on the side. I'm holding the pencil at the end. Now I'm going to keep it nice and light, and I'm going to start working on the body. Now, because the body isn't as refined as the face, because there's lots of features on the face, so what I'm going to do is, in line with the way that the fur goes, I'm going to bring in very lightly, and at the end I'm just going to bring in a little bit of shadow in where the body has a bit of a shadow, but my pencil marks are going to go the same direction as the fur. Remember, it doesn't always stay the same, depending on how the angle of the dog is or what the subject is it may change. Because of this dog's actually sitting down or laying down, sorry. The fur here is actually going this direction, whereas this bit of fur is coming down. So it's making sure that you move about and you're actually changing as you're seeing it. Now this area here, it comes outwards. Goes over. And although you can see there are some single hairs, you know, you don't have to put them in yet because this is going to all be smudged in. This is getting our shadow work done again. It's all linking it all in. Right, what I'll do is I'm going to carry on. You can carry on, and then I'll pause it. And once they're all done, we'll do some smudging, and then we'll go from there. So as you can see, I've now given the direction of the fur would be going in, but also where there's some darker patches on the original, I've actually used a circular rotation just to build up them darker areas, and that's still using a 3B. Once we've done that far, then we're going to go over it with our smudger. Try and start with the lighter bits first. Still going in the same direction as the fur. Apart from around this edge here, just don't want it to be. That's it. Sorry about the squeaking noises that you can hear. That's because my son has a squeaky bed. He's just been down here to get some breakfast whilst I was on pause. Seems that furloughing people means that they get to have a lay in, don't they? Well, some of them do. My husband's been furloughed and all. He's been so kind. He's keeping upstairs out the way so I can do the tutorial bits. So I not only take over the house with all my storage, take over all the house, full stop. underneath the chin, there's not really a direction that you can see the hairs and what way they're going, because it's just a bit of a blur. So we're going to incorporate that bit of a blur on our picture. Hopefully you'll be able to take the same sort of techniques that we're using here. And if you do have pets at home and that you want to do your own portrait of your own pet, you'll be able to incorporate these. Right. And what we do, just smudge that in just gently. We're going to be adding more colour and tone into this anyway, so. All right. We move on to the paws. Let's make sure you can see first. There you go. So as we come down, we're going to use the same tones that we did. And we can see that there's hairs running down certain directions again. Now this little groove here did have a little bit of a darker edge to it. Fade out that side because that's quite a dark bit. The rest doesn't need to be faded because it actually got this dark ridge. Right, so we're going to keep on adding nice little short applications with your pencil here. Remember, this area here has got a little bit of darker to it because of the shadowing. It's picking up a lot more shadows because the light's coming from this direction. And this is where you've got a little bit more detail. And obviously the claws are darker and we want them nice and, I suppose, nice and sharp, the edge to that. It's still got a transition, it's not a solid colour, it is outer bits are darker, and then the centre bit is catching a bit of light there. Okay, next one. Move down, keeping them little areas. It's shorter hairs that you'd see, so by just doing little tiny applications with your pencil, applying a bit of shadow, it all helps to build up an overall sort of look. And once again, you've got this dark claw. Now you don't see the edge of the claw because there is a little bit of material. Oh dear. You're going to hear a little yelping. That's one of my doggies having a bad dream. She does it quite often. I've never known a dog like it. She also suckles sometimes in her sleep. You see a little tongue hanging out as though she's suckling. Oh, bless her. Once again, got another claw coming down there. This one's actually catching a little bit of light at the top, maybe. Then in between there, got this darker bit coming up again. Another claw. Don't worry too much about the material. Done that bit wrong. That should be there. See, even I do a little bit wrong sometimes, and you can easily adjust it when you get to it. Going to add a bit more, just loose little shadowing, but it looks like hairs. Then we're going to come in can just go over. It will take away most of the hair that you've put on, but it's just giving you that lovely shadows that we need. We're going to do exactly the same over the other side, and then we'll start darkening them up, okay? So I'm going to pause it again so that you can do exactly the same what we've done on one side, transition that over, do exactly the same on here, and then we'll blend them, and then we should be back to carrying on, all right? Right, so I've added some more depth to it. Now I'm just going to go over and we're going to start smudging a bit more. Although you've put the detail in, you've actually not overdone the detail so that your eyes are distracted from looking at the face. Oh, by the way, if it helps, if you give me any feedback, if you found this, easy to follow, or, I can always try altering how I'm doing it. Obviously, it's all new to me, and I'm just trying to do as best I can. And that's the reason why I chose pencil work, because I thought that might be something that everyone might have at home, so that if you did want to have a go at doing this, it's accessible. I'm actually leaving some of the pencil mark on there now, rather than smudging it completely in. Because that will help bring out the fur. Right, just to soften up the area. Just going over it with my finger. And once again, if you feel that there's areas that you want to highlight more, you can take some of it out again here by using a rubber, or if you've got one of these silicone sort of smudgy things, you can use that. Right, what we're going to do now is we're going to finish off doing a bit of the back, because you've got a little bit of his back leg coming there. So I'm back with my 3B. Now remember, this area here that we've just shaded in is actually lighter, so we are allowed to now use our negative area again. So we're going to darken this up. Right, let's blend that in. Bit more transition going on. And if you look at real detail here, there's another little area that could quite easily get overlooked. And there. Now what I've just done now is actually done another bit of negative work, I've darkened up this bit underneath the chin and faded it out. That gives our nice edge to our chin here. And then there's another little tiny layer there where obviously there's a bit of skin that cuts and folds in. That'd be someone at the door.
Big time. Yeah.
We have a doorbell. Oh, thank you. Very long. Thank you very much. We've recently put a door on our living room rather than having a dog gate, haven't we? Yeah, it's been recorded, darling. Yeah, so we can't hear the door now, other than if the dogs hear the door, they go barking. But other than that, can't hear the door, so we've had to get a doorbell. Right. Darkening this area up a bit more. That's enough. No. Oh, they have to try. Right. Bit more smudging. Right, I'm just going to pause it a bit and then we'll work on bringing in a bit more of the depth in the background. We're going to put a little tiny bit of the fabric that it's laying on, and hopefully that'll start bringing it out a bit more as well. Okay, so we've darkened up a little bit of the areas. I've come over now and I'm actually just resting a little tiny bit of pencil work over the top of where we've already smudged in, and this is just to show the fur. And I'm not going to do the fur all over, just little hints here and there, because some of the fur you don't actually see, it's all a bit fuzzy in there, but where you do see, we'll just add a tiny amount, just give that realism bit coming on. And for this, I've made sure that I've got a nice sharp pencil. I'm using my 3B, but you could use HB, anything that's not too soft, but still dark enough to give you a nice crisp line, so it looks like you've got your hairs. Obviously there's some of the hairs that you're not going to see, like I say, and just remember about the direction that they're working in. And don't worry about them being too regimental. Like I told you in the past, hairs aren't like that. So if you do have some that sort of crisscross over a little bit, allow that to happen, because it's naturally would happen. Although with shorter hair dogs, their hairs do tend to be quite close. So it shouldn't be too much crisscrossing going on. But the longer the hairs, obviously they would bit like your blades of grass, because you wouldn't have all your blades of grass all standing up to attention. There's so much observation that you do when you're doing your portraits and stuff like that. You don't realise how much detail you need to incorporate half the time until you start. It's the same as when you're looking at colours. I say with the acrylics and stuff, and you're picking out the colours and you don't realise how many colours there end up being. Just a few down here. Now this direction they're going this way, and they're changing that way. And they come in that way. And I do have some really, really good news that I'm going to share. And it looks like my son might have a job. So he's got a job interview on Monday. But hopefully it goes well. And he ends up with a job. Lots and lots and lots of hairs. You think you're getting somewhere to finish it, and then there's more and more. Very gently, once again, just going over all of them hairs. Same direction as the hairs, but just softens them up. gently. Remember, I'm not taking off the look of the hairs. I'm just literally brushing my finger over it so lightly. It's just literally loosening up what's there. Right, next we're going to work on the actual background. Okay, that's very, very subtle. We're not going to do too much of it, but where we've got some creases going on, we're going to incorporate them. Okay, so got a nice little bit of dark here. I'm going to bring that up to that side. I'm going to go down here. Just fade that out. Now the pencil I'm using for this is a dark one again. And as you can see, I'm making the background slightly darker because this lovely light edge here, we want to ping that forward. Make sure you keep looking at the picture as well, just to make sure that we're getting it right. Because there's a bit of a shadow that comes up over here as well. Like I say, it's about using that negative space. So here's nice and dark, but we're not going to go too dark because if there's obviously a transition between what is the material and what is the actual dog. See, all of this area is dark on the outside. When it comes up to that claw, the claw is actually darker than there, so we have to make sure that that bit continues a bit lighter. That bit there goes dark, but around where the claw is, keep it nice and light. We're not going to put the pattern into the actual material. Just going to do patches of light, patches of dark. If you can hear that again. That's my dog again. Well, one of them. Sounds like she's actually laughing in her sleep now. Remember, like I say again, if you need to use, because you don't want to put your arm in it, you can use a separate bit of paper if you've already done that area. Now this one, I can't see properly. Hold on. As you can see down here, this area here is darker than this. So it's just keeping them consistencies going. So light to dark, dark to light, using your negative areas. I'm not going to go too far away from the actual portrait with this, because you don't want any of it to be a focal point. It is just part and parcel of grounding it onto your paper, so it doesn't look like the dog's just floating there. You've actually given it something to be on. Now here, if you notice this edge, I'm going to put a nice darker bit in the middle where our line is, but there's not really either side that's darker than the other, so we're going to keep that nice and neutral. And then you've got some more edge over here. And this is darker, going back up to about there. Then, once again, this bit is darker, going back that way. This bit is actually darker on the inside here. You should in a minute be able to see the effect what this negative area does to the actual side of the dog. I'll put a tiny bit on this side. That's darker. Right. So when we start blending, I'm going to start over here again because I've made that a little bit darker than it was before. Right. Very lightly here. I'm going to use my finger just to drink that a little bit more. Just try and get all the way in. I'm only giving it like a light sort of smudge, and the rest I'm going to just blend out with my finger. Right. What I'll do is I'm going to pause it again so I don't take up too much of your time, but what we'll do is we'll get all the way over to the end of smudging, then I'll come back on, okay? Right, so shadow has been sort of smudged in now with all of the cloth that it's laying on, okay? If you want to now start bringing in any sort of deeper sort of tones, you can do that. You can smudge out with your finger if you need to. You can refine it a bit more. Put a bit more sharpness to the claws if you want to. If you think that there's any need to darken up certain areas, because I think I'm going to put a little bit more depth into the cheek and to define them a little bit more. Maybe a tiny bit more work on the colouring that I've got on the forehead. It's all little step by little step. And to be honest, you could keep going and going and going. And that's where I end up getting very picky, because of after this, you're just refining and making certain areas look a bit more sharper. Just darkening up this bit because there seems to be a bit more tone that needs going on there now. I'm not going with the flow of the hairs, because what I'm going to try and do is do this as a solid sort of like shade rather than part and parcel of where the hairs are. When I run my finger over it gently, it just adds to it. Same here. I've got this darker patch here, comes up. It's really starting to take shape, isn't it? Now this side is actually in a bit of shadow, so what I'm going to do is very lightly bring that in to be a bit darker. Right, and just go over it with my lip smudger. Now at the moment we have no dark patch behind here, so in theory what we could do is you could darken up this area behind so it pings it all forward, or we could just stick with it being nice and pale, and we're just going to run the smudger over the edges just to soften them up. And then the only thing left to do after that is to actually put in our whiskers. Right, now when you're doing your whiskers, you want a nice dark pencil, but you don't want it to be too soft. So if we revert back to using our redo, wherever that may be, lost mine. Just make sure it's nice and sharp. And what you're going to do is you're going to get yourself in a nice sort of position where you're feeling comfortable. Now if you want to get yourself a spare bit of paper and actually practice, then do so. I'm just going to come in and I'm going to get myself comfy. I'm going to lay my thumbprint there. So we've got some we're going to come across, and I'm not going to go past there's a couple of little ones down here. Underneath the chin, you've got a couple there. So out that way. That way. You've got the little tiny dimple bit there. You have a hair that comes out upwards. You realise you've got a couple of hairs coming out of the dimple on the other side. Hairs coming out from here. Hairs further down. Then we've got that one here is actually quite a wide one, so I'm going to go over that one again. Then we have the eyes. Now the eyes got a little tiny bit of hairs that you can see going round, so we'll add them in. And then there's a longer hair coming from here over there. On the other side, once again, you've got some hairs. Now, I'm just going to darken that bit up a little bit more there. There's a bit more shadowing going around that eye on the inside. Darken that bit up there. And down here, just add in a bit more finer hairs. These are not really showing up as such, they're just there for direction and to assist a bit more with the shading. Just adding where and when we think that it's necessary. But overall, it's coming along nicely. We've got just a few more bits that I would tinker with. That would be, I know, sorry. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some of these little hairs opposite way round, so it looks like the lighter hairs are actually the ones that are overlapping. Right. What I'm going to say is I will leave it there for you, but I will probably end up doing a few more bits just to deepen the colours. But you actually, at the moment, you don't really need to do any of that. You should be at a good stage where you could say that it's actually complete. Okay? So hopefully that's the end. Hope you've enjoyed.